Greetings, friends. My name is Wess Daniels. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm really glad to be with all of you at College Park today. I have been to College Park numerous times. I know many of you, and glad to be back speaking on John chapter 6. So if you'll join me in a moment of prayer, we'll begin. May the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart be acceptable and pleasing to you, the Lord, our rock and our redeemer. So at Guilford College, where I work, as a staff member and part-time faculty, I have been teaching a class called Food and Faith for the past couple of years with Bronwyn Tucker, a great colleague of mine. In this class, we explore the intersections between food and faith. We eat food. We talk about our personal and collective histories of food. We learn how different religions interact with food, the ways the global empires within which we are situated grow, use, profit from, and control food, and the land and water it grows from. I've learned through this class that food is more than just fuel that runs our fast-paced lives, marked by long lines at our favorite fast food restaurants, Trader Joe's pre-made dinners, of which I am very grateful for, the invention of the microwave, Instapots, air fryers, Keurigs, don't even get me started on Keurigs, and of course, in my opinion, the monstrosity of the new genre of food science, invented energy drinks like Monster, Rockstar, C4, and G Fuel energy drinks that come in two flavors, black ooze and red ooze. Food is more than fuel. It is more than something to simply hand out and quickly consume. Food is an entry point, a lens into every aspect of our lives. Food helps us explore community, faith and family, climate change, racism, class, economy, imperialism, our relationship to our bodies, our relationship to one another, our relationship to God, to the land, to workers who labor for the food, for those who make the food, and those who sit down together creating a family around the bread we break. The way we think about food tells us something about our lived theology, our faith. Food is storied. Food is nutrition. Food is life. As Danny Rojas from the show Ted Lasso might shout, food is life. Jesus is in this chapter from John chapter 6, representing himself as food when he says, I am the bread of life. I cannot help but hear an invitation to see bread as something more universal, something more powerful than just fuel to be consumed. Bread is a universal metaphor for that which we all need to live. Bread is life. Just a few verses before in the same chapter is a story that I know you are all familiar with, the feeding of the 5,000. What does Jesus feed those 5,000 with? Fresh fish and bread. Here, Jesus is found near the Sea of Galilee on the side of a large hill with a crowd gathered round. He'd been teaching the people for some time. It was almost Passover, so it was getting late. And Philip sees all the people, and rightfully so, is probably hungry himself and wants to know, when can we stop with the teaching and start with the eating? What do we do when we don't have enough bread to go around? I want you to pause right here for a second and imagine this crowd, which is bigger than just a normal crowd. It is in the Greek called an oxlos noulos, literally a great army. This phrase is later translated in Revelation 7 as the multitude, a translation I prefer because it tells us something about this crowd. Wes Howard Brooke, in his commentary on the Gospel of John, says that this crowd is made up of the poor and the dispossessed, Galilean countryside folk, who were generally speaking not just poor, but leery of establishment figures given their own low status within the Roman Empire and the religious institutions of their time. Galilee was very much on the outskirts of empire. And disaffected peasants, who I hope you have already noted, are not at the official Passover ceremonies, but outside on a hilltop with some poor rogue rabbi who is clearly standing outside organized religious authority. What are they doing there? Why are they not where they belong? This is why one chapter later, this multitude are called cursed by the Pharisees because of their ignorance of the sanctioned interpretations, the official interpretations of the Torah. In other words, here we find Jesus, a poor teacher and prophet, on a hillside organizing other poor people. We all know how that generally goes, don't we? So we come back to this question of food, and Jesus responds with a question: where are we to buy bread for these people? Okay, so let's consider the options for response to this question. What do we do when we need bread? Okay, so there's the first option where we take an individualized approach and we send all the people on their way home to fend for themselves. Have we ever seen this modeled in our families, communities, and in our country? Look, you're on your own. It's not our problem that you didn't think ahead and pack something. It's not our problem that you don't have enough to eat to begin with. You're probably lazy or have done something to deserve being hungry and poor. You needing bread is not my problem. Does any of that sound familiar? The individualized approach can be sort of thought of as, or an example of this is when I was in high school and a part of the church that I was in at the time, we did something called a food ministry or food giveaway, and we would get loaves of bread donated from a local store, and we would walk around poor neighborhoods, we'd knock on doors, we would introduce ourselves, and we would offer a loaf of bread to people, and then we would ask to pray for them, and then we would move on. And it was a nice experience. It was nice to give bread to someone. It was nice to meet them, to pray for people in our neighborhood, but it was a one-off. We did it one time. And while it may have helped in that immediate moment, in an individualized way, it didn't go any further than that. A second option is we take Philip's idea and we try to figure out how to pay for everyone's meal. Philip goes right for the charity model. How much is it going to cost for us to pay for everyone? It is our responsibility to fix it for them. The charity model of response to poverty maintains distance between us and them and creates a power differential that keeps people in poverty while not disrupting the systems that created and perpetuate that problem. It is often a quicker, easier solution in the short term to just throw some money at the problem, right? But despite billions of dollars flowing through the nonprofit industrial complex, people remain hungry, remain homeless, face dramatically higher rates of illness and mortality due to poverty. A third option is to read the feeding of the 5,000 the way we normally do, as a miracle that only Jesus can do. Here's a problem that Jesus can fix. In this reading, the disciples are more spectators rather than participants, stepping back in hopes that Jesus can resolve the issue. We hear this spiritualization of concrete needs when people use phrases like, our thoughts and prayers are with you, in the way of 140 million people who are poor or one paycheck away from being homeless. Or our thoughts and prayers are with you when we see children go without food. Our thoughts and prayers are with you when we experience gun violence in our schools and community centers. Thoughts and prayers in the face of ongoing police brutality. Thoughts and prayers when learning of violence against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and other queer people. Or how about it's all going to burn anyway? Why care for land and animals and so on? Thoughts and prayers rest on a spiritualization of this story, and Jesus as the only one who can live out these kinds of ethics and calling. But all this really is an abdication of our responsibility in the face of grave injustice. Can you see how these three, individual, charity, and spiritualized approaches, are all ways in which we respond as a society living in an age of empire to this question of what do we do when the poor need bread? There's a fourth option that I want to lift up to you, and that is about inhabiting a different world within an alternative imagination, finding oneself within an alternative community that resists the influence and business as usual of empire. In our day and age, we might call this story of the feeding of the 5,000 a project of survival. Folks are fed and they are given the necessary analysis to organize as a community to provide for one another's needs and resist empire and its beastly economics. That's what I think the teachings of Jesus surrounding these events are about. I'm choosing the name of projects of survival here carefully. The phrase projects of survival originates, as you probably know, from the Black Panthers, and names a project that is both about meeting concrete, immediate needs, while educating and organizing the poor and oppressed in such a way that those needs are no longer constantly in threat. This comes out of the Black Panthers' own breakfast program, which was a free breakfast program that fed tens of thousands of children and created a basis for educating both children and their parents on the failures of Johnson's war on poverty, and how a country so wealthy was using wealth to harm people both in the US and around the globe. There are other examples of projects of survival today. Put People First PA recently has taken on the state's closures of hospitals in poor and rural communities, leaving some communities with up to 2-hour drives to get to the nearest hospital. The National Union of the Homeless, where homeless people organize and run their own shelters, seeking to bring an end to homelessness. Their motto is homeless, not helpless. And Fight for 15, NC Raise Up. Not only are they fighting for a better basic minimum wage, but they've also started a program called Fed Up in order to organize food drives for fast food workers who are going hungry while working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Noam Sandweiss Beck writes for the Kairos Center, saying that projects of survival do many things. 1, they meet the needs of people who can then come into a new political consciousness. 2, they encourage and secure leaders who have a sense of their own agency and political clarity. 3, they connect to political programs that rely on many different tactics and strategies. 4, they expose the larger society to the moral failures and contradictions of governing, and I'll add religious systems. And they make demands and claims on the power of the state. So what do you think about reading the feeding of the 5,000 as a project of survival in this view? They meet the needs of the people. They were encouraging and securing leaders who have their own agency, relying on different tactics and strategies to care for one another, exposing larger societal moral failures, and making demands and claims on power. I think that's a yes for all of those. The point here is obvious. Jesus's goal is both to meet the basic needs of the people while also educating and organizing the poor in his time so that they can bring about a truly new world, the kingdom of God on earth now. When Jesus gives bread and then says his way is itself the bread of life, we get a glimpse at his strategy as a poor person organizing other poor people. Jesus, being the bread of life, is both the concrete need of food and the political, theological education necessary to resist empire and follow God into liberation, no matter the cost. Bread enough for everyone is a key part of Jesus's projects of survival. We know this because of what is said in John 6 about feeding of the 5,000, him being the bread of life, the multiple feeding stories throughout all of the Gospels, but also the prayer that he taught his disciples to live by, asking only for enough bread for the day so that everyone can have bread. And of course, the broken body as bread that we remember every time we gather. Jesus demonstrates to the multitude that projects of survival are not only an alternative economic based on bread enough for everyone, but what they, the multitude, are capable of together as an alternative Eucharistic community, no matter how poor and cursed they are. A community grounded in meeting concrete needs with the theological and political analysis needed to challenge the powers and the principalities out of alignment with God's purpose. Jesus is the bread of life. To eat that bread, to commune with Christ who is present in our midst with those at this table, is to enter into a different way of being human, a different way of being community, a different way of relating to ourselves and to God, undergirded by this theology of bread, this economy of bread for all. Living into this means we will, as Wess Brooke puts it, face the social consequences of participation in the Eucharistic community amid imperial supervision. What do we do when we need bread, when those in our immediate community are hungry? When those in our community are literally starving, being evicted from their homes, cannot pay their utilities, are being brutalized, do their needs and voices go unheard? As we take all that we have learned during this pandemic and apply it to an almost post-pandemic world, where can College Park be living into this alternative economy? What projects of survival are you being led to engage with, no matter the social consequences? What does it mean to this community to embrace the bread of life as a way of life for all? Thank you, friends.
Love is patient, love is kind. It has no arrogance or pride. It seeks the good of others first. It keeps no record of wrong or hurt. It finds no joy in wickedness, but rejoices in the truth. And through it all it will endure. Love will never fail. Love will never, never fail. Love will never, never fail. Love will never, never fail. Love will never fail. Though all prophecy will cease, though all knowledge it will fade, no, an end will see you face to face, and your mercy will prevail. Faith and hope, they will remain. Oh, love will never fail. Love will never, never fail. Love will never, never fail. Love will never, never fail. Love will never fail.
All right, and let me close with a benediction. This comes from the poem from Bethany Lee, who's a Quaker who lives out in the Pacific Northwest. This is just an excerpt from her prayer that was shared earlier. And some are beginning to remember to decide to hold hands anyway. And some never stopped remembering to hold hands anyway. And some are bearing witness while others give away their bread. We will be the ones with poetry in our hearts who rhyme love with love, with love, with love, with love, with love, with love. Amen. And go in peace.